Welcome to another round of coffee and donuts. I'm Frank, the law enforcement training director here at Armageddon, and this is where I answer your questions about the police hiring process or the career in general. Let's discuss. Before we jump into the questions, we answer every question that comes across our social platform, starting at YouTube and working our way back there. So if you have a question, you can put it on there and it has a chance of ending up here on Coffee and Donuts or me answering in our short form platforms. Now, also, you can leave a more private message over on our contact form over at armageddonct.com on our website, and we'll be sure to get back to those as first. And in addition to that, we have our blog out there, and we're posting new blogs every week that expand the training just beyond the hiring process all the way to complete success in your academy, in your FTO, or your career in general as a law enforcement officer. Now, that being said, let's jump into the first question. Are there are there general policies? Are there general policy materials? There we go. People can read up on before even entering the academy. Looks like a lot to memorize within little time. Don't see how that benefits. I agree, actually, because you're sitting here saying, "Hey, I want to put in the extra effort. I want to get to know the information." I've mentioned this before, and there's a kind of counterintuitive situation to this where it's got to be a balance. And I'm not saying a fine line, but definitely a balance. And you'll hear me use that word all the time in training is balance. You don't sit here and what if to the extreme on this side and what if to the extreme on this side. You need to understand that it needs to be a balance. They say that there's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, and you need to balance out those two. So with regards to this question, there is some literature out there. Like you can start looking into case law, Graham v. Connor, Mapp v. Ohio, Tennessee v. Gardner, things like that. But here's the problem with that. And this is why it 100% stands because even lawyers, even courts, right, still battle over these in regards to their application. So here's what I mean by this. You're going to sit here and say you have no legal background, or let's just say you do. Let's just say you're a very educated academic and you believe that you have the capacity to interpret and understand written word. You could go through and you could read Tennessee v. Gardner and you could have one entire interpretation of it. And then you could get to the academy and they tell you you're completely wrong and you fail your operations training because you thought that this is how you applied Tennessee v. Gardner to a set of circumstances. Now I'm using a very broad example here, but it's much like firearms training, right? You could come in and you could have had a lot of practice shooting your entire life. You could have grown up, shooting, and you feel that you're very competent. Um, but we call that. But then you come in and you're all over the place, or you have a beautiful grouping, but it's down to the left or down to the right, or it's high, and you're saying, man, it's the firearm, it's the firearm. But then an instructor takes it and puts five perfect shots downrange. What it is it's a training scar, right? And that's the problem. I don't want to say when you have bad training because it's always better to train than to not train. But when you don't have an intentional training plan, right? Like today, I'm going to work on trigger press, and I'm only going to work on trigger press until I shoot 100 perfect shots with zero deviation. Or I'm only going to review Tennessee v. Gardner with the actual applications that I'm told as it applies to a law enforcement officer. And your your reason for doing this is to make sure that you apply it properly. So when I say, hey, there's stuff that you can read that that will apply that are general stuff like these typical case laws, it doesn't really benefit you if you apply it wrong. If your own personal bias or your own interpretation gets it wrong. I shouldn't say gets it wrong, but misinterprets or doesn't interpret it the way that law enforcement are training you to interpret it, your application out in the field might be wrong. And that could lead to yourself getting hurt, your partner getting hurt, bystanders or citizens getting hurt. So that is why it's very critical to to make sure you're training in the right way, which is why I tell everyone the academy is that basic training. And we're not expecting you to be perfect. Matter of fact, one of the best things I've ever heard coming out of the academy is we don't expect them to be perfect leaving here. They have a lot more training, and you have a whole career's worth of training. If you ever think you're done training in the law enforcement career, please just hang up the duty belt. Just call it a day, hang up the badge, go over into another field and just don't do it anymore, because those are when we see egos getting in the way. Those are when we see things really, really messing things up. But I digress. Going back to this question. Yes, you can look at that stuff, but if you're going to do it, make sure you keep an open mind when you get to the academy about interpretation, right? Because I don't want you going in so fixated as I read Tennessee v. Garner, I read Mapp v. Ohio, I read Pennsylvania v. Mims, and I know these inside and out. I know exactly. Yes, but do you have the court's interpretation down, right? And that's kind of the big thing. And with today's society, I mean, it's very hard not to get opinionated statements that might not exactly pertain to law enforcement training. So that's one caveat. And I'm going to kind of use a controversial subject here, which is why you really need to stick to the policies of the department and the state that you're applying to. Let's take marijuana, right? This is a super controversial subject. Should it be legal? It is legal. I'm going to tell you right now, marijuana, as the time of me recording this, right, is not legalized federally. It is still a scheduled controlled substance. So recreational possession, and it's a scheduled one. So recreational possession of this substance is highly illegal. It's up there with, heroin, right? Now, for those listening are like, that's ridiculous, Frank. How dare, but I don't make those rules, right? I can't control that. I don't have any intentions right now for running for political office, so it's not much I can do right now other than just advise when someone that holds a higher political office or holds a political office asks me for that. But so don't beat me up on this one. But some states still 100% illegal. Other states, let's use California. I'm not picking on California, but let's use completely decriminalized. Matter of fact, as a law enforcement officer, they can't even ask you about marijuana use. Now, you can't test for it, right? You're still going to get drug tested, and if it's in your system at the time of appointment, you will, probably get in trouble, and you cannot consume marijuana while being a law enforcement officer or while on duty. Um, but they've changed the law to where they can't even ask about it in a hiring practice, and that's the state law. Well, what I would tell you is yeah, learn this, for this one department or this one agency, you need to learn this and learn these that might not apply over here to this state. And once again, even federally, 100%. So if we were to dive down the legal structuring of not only the Constitution, but the who has the rights to do what and what rights are passed to the state if there's not federal law on it, but there is a federal law on it, right? And this is getting into the weeds of legality and legal and lawyers and courts and things along those lines. But that's why you never really hear me recommend, hey, learn this policy, learn this one policy, because it's so different from department to department, to state, from federal to state. And while I wish it was more standardized, it it's very hard to do in an actual application. There's so many differencing of opinions on this, and it's just something that you have to understand is really hard. So that's why I always recommend be open-minded when you go to the academy. Be ready to learn in the academy. In the meantime, you need to be focusing on the things you can control, and that maybe you have a difficulty, reading or comprehending or your slow test. I'd work on improving those things, not just for the hiring process, but for the academy, for promotion exams. I'd work on your physical fitness, right? Something that you can 100% guarantee you're going to need, not only in the academy, not only in FTO, but throughout your career, so that you maintain the safety of yourself and others around you. That's where I would go with this, but I'm beating this question up. Let's move on to the next one. I failed my psychological evaluation. I'm sorry to hear that, and was disqualified for a year. I'm planning on applying again to that same position, but what should I do if I remember something I didn't put in my background investigation? I put that I had a write up in one of my jobs and didn't remember what it was for until my psych interview. I had passed everything else, including the polygraph and medical exam. Okay, so a couple things here. One, the fact that you're going back in a year, I'll support that, and I'm going to give a caveat here. But it sounds like you might not need to change. It sounds like the way you worded this is you put it down. You had a write up at one of your jobs, but you didn't remember what it was for. I'm assuming you put that write up down on your background packet, right? I'm assuming that you put it down on your previous one. So it should be on there, just won't have the detail of what you now recall. That being said, if you did recall it and you remember, like, hey, I know I had a write up, but I didn't remember what it was, so I didn't put it down, that's omission, and that's a disqualifying factor on your previous one. Now, what's it going to mean when you put it down on this one? Well, this is what happens. This is one of the detriments to applying to the same department over and over and over again, is there's a level of access to that of information that they have without any struggle, right? Which is including your prior PHS or your prior background packet. So you have two hurdles that I'm immediately seeing right now. One, you have a failed psych, which means you're going to go back to the same psychological office unless they change vendors, right? So if you get the same person or you get the same office, they're going to have notes on you and you're going to have to be able to overcome those, except you might not know what they are, right? Or statistically, you probably don't know what they wrote about you. So that's one hurdle, right? Now, have we done it? Yes. Actually, one of my, you know, standards of individuals that I say is one of our members that got hired 8 months after she failed the psych due to the psych's biased nature towards their religious beliefs. And then she went back and crushed the psych and got hired immediately with the same psychologist. So it's possible, and we do it. But I'm just trying to say that you're putting a hurdle in your own way, right? If this is your dream department, um, you also have the option of lateraling to them later on at a different time. And it's very hard for a psychologist to say, hey, you're not equipped to be a law enforcement officer when you're already a law enforcement officer. They have to really make some strides to prove that. So, especially when you're a law enforcement officer that's had 1 or 2 years of good conduct and no issues. Now, the other aspect to this is now you have to change something on your PHS, which they're going to immediately be able to compare, and that's the first thing they're going to do. So it is a conundrum. It is another hurdle that you're putting on yourself. So you're adding two additional hurdles that weren't there before. Uh, so be honest, state what the write up was for, articulate it properly. If it wasn't on the last one, they're going to ask you, why didn't you list this on the last one? And just be honest with them. Hey, I couldn't recall exactly what it was for. I didn't list it. It was a mistake on my end. They're probably going to beat you up for that a little bit, but if you articulate it right, they should keep moving you forward just because you've had success at passing all the other stuff prior. Now, that's the bonus to it, right? They know that your background's fairly clean because they've already ran it, and they know your biggest hurdle is the psych, right? So they're going to have that reservation about spending all this money doing it all again. But the background investigator this time around is going to say, "Hey, although most of the work was done for me already, I just need to verify it all." So that's a big win in your corner. And then the psych, that psych's going to be a battle because you're going back to the same vendor that's already failed you. And I promise you, they're going to read the notes from the last psychologist, or you might get the same one and they're going to read their own notes. So just keep that in mind. All right, last question. What if I asked to refill out my background form after I already submitted it because I remember extra information to add or to correct? Okay. This kind of goes hand in hand with the last question, second part of the last question. But here's what I will tell you if you realize you made a mistake. First of all, immediately contact your background investigator or your point of contact and say, hey, I have some things to add. But when I say immediately, I mean make sure you have everything that you need to add. Because if you keep doing that, oh, I need to add this, I need to add this, oh, I need to add this, you're going to get DQ'd because they're just going to DQ you for omission or failure to properly complete documentation, right? And it's pointless when you should just. That's getting fired up over here. That's why That's why the preparation phase is so critical. Please listen to me on this one. Do not overlook the preparation phase. Having so much as your references emails. I was just reading a message this morning from a coaching member of mine that said, Frank, I had to submit it. I had 24 hours left to submit it. And I didn't have one of my references emails and I wasn't able to get in contact with them. So I had to move references around and I ended up putting one of my colleagues in my reference section and I had to, find a new colleague and they were running around and they're not sure they put the greatest reference down in that spot now because, and it wasn't because they didn't do the legwork, but it's because they weren't meticulous about it. They weren't specific about it. And what I'm trying to say is if you do this now, you do this right, this takes a whole level of stress. I love it when people come to me and say, Frank, all in all, that wasn't that bad getting hired. And I'm like, it wasn't that bad, or you were just that prepared. And that's the difference. That's the people that say, that hiring process wasn't that bad. No, you were just that prepared for it. And that's what I want. I want everyone to be that prepared for it that they say, you know what? Other than the hurry up and wait, wasn't too bad. It happened exactly how I thought it would, or exactly how I was taught it was, or all my research came into play and it worked out perfectly. That's what I want to hear. But unfortunately, I don't hear that enough because you got to take the preparation phase seriously. So, getting to this, to answer your question directly, you need to reach out to them immediately. And when I say immediately, I mean, I'm not talking about this instant. I'm saying you need to really look back, review your PHS over the next hour, make sure you have everything accurate. And if you don't, you need to send an email saying, hey, I apologize. After re-reviewing, these were some additional things I had to add. As for them unlocking your background form or allowing you to fill out a whole nother one, that's unlikely. Matter of fact, the fact that they know that this one's wrong, they're going to keep this one now. And they're going to keep it to make sure that they can compare it to any other changes that may possibly be made. So, yeah, just message them immediately with all the updates that need to have, and then you better be ready to articulate why you didn't recall them or have them ready to go. It's not as simple. Everyone thinks it's just as simple as, oh, I'm just going to update this. And don't do it right before your investigation interview or your background interview or right before your polygraph, if you can avoid it. If that's coming up and you have that and you recalled something and you're watching this right now and you're saying, oh man, mine's tomorrow. That it is what it is, do it. But it's better than waiting to during the actual interview. That's the worst. But if you wait during the interview or the actual poly, they're probably going to fail you for omission for changing answers at that point in time. But if you do it right before, they're going to say, well, were you just getting nervous about the interview or the polygraph, and that's why you changed it? So you want to do it as soon as possible, but don't do it a half a dozen times because they're going to hate it and they're just going to remove you from the process. I hope this helps. Remember, we have a couple extra things for you. You can submit any question you want over on our social platforms. We start with YouTube, work our way back, and we answer all our questions. If you have something that you want to submit over to us directly and even more sensitive or not, you can just message us directly. Go to our website at armageddonct.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page. You will see a contact form. Fill that out, and we will contact you or get back to you on your question immediately. The other thing is our blog. Go check out our blog. We're doing more than just hiring training over there. We're trying to make your career as successful as possible, all the way from promotions to running a department. I hope this helps. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.